Adding a little bit of sexy Dexter to that defensive line over the weekend. Yes, Dexter Lawrence heading that way after the Bengals and Giants had that blockbuster trade, trading away the number 10 overall pick in 2026 draft for the three-time Pro Bowler in Lawrence and signed him to a one-year extension worth $28 million. Remember how bad Cincy's defense has been, but Lawrence will waste no time in sharing he's looking forward to put on those Bengals colors 2026.
They wanted me here, and they appreciate the work that I've put in over the last 7 seasons. And, I appreciate that to them. And I'm going to do everything I can to, show them that they didn't waste it. And I'm excited. I got fire in me that I ain't never had this fire before. So I'm excited, and I'm excited to be a Bengal. I know it's going to be, people going to say pressure, but I embrace it. I bring it in, It doesn't affect me, the pressure. I just know who I am, and I'm stay true to that. And I'm gonna be the guy to, help this defense go to the next level.
So while he's looking to improve that defense when it comes to Cincy, the other part of that deal, the Giants, guess what? They get their second pick in the first round there, 10th overall. But they're not alone when it comes to double dipping in the first round. You see the Jets, Browns, Chiefs, Dolphins, and my Cowboys with 12 and 20. Do something right, Jerry, please. All right, for more of the NFL, Mike Renner tapping in with us. And Mike, you see all those teams there, as I said, double dipping in this year's first round draft. Plenty of holes to fill on every team that I just mentioned. But I want to start with Aaron Glenn's Jets. They have 2 and 16. What do you think they need to do there?
I think number 2 is a pass rusher. It's going to be either David Bailey or Arvell Reese. I remain convinced it's Arvell Reese, the Ohio State off-ball linebacker, just because his ceiling is so crazy high. And the Jets and where they're at, they don't necessarily need the guy right now, right? They're not ready to compete tomorrow. They want the guy year 3, year 4 who's going to be an all-pro. And to me, that's Arvell Reese. Then that pick in the middle of the first round, 16, I think it's going to be a slot receiver. I think giving because there's a lot of good ones in this draft class, whether it's Kai Lemon or Omar Cooper Jr., who I have them going with here, the Indiana wide receiver, would just round out this receiving core with Adonai Mitchell and Garrett Wilson to give Geno Smith truly probably one of the 5 best receiving cores in the NFL in terms of guys that can get open. And he has the skill set that the other 2 don't. He's much more of a power forward, over the middle of the field guy, can put the ball in his hands, and he can create yak after the catch. The other 2 you don't really want going over the middle of the football field. So the Jets are in a really good spot to change their fortune here.
Plenty of highlights from Cooper, the reason why he was part of that natty team at Indiana. At 5 and 10, if you're the Giants, what cornerstone pieces are you finding for Harbaugh?
I've been saying number 5 has been Sonny Styles all along, the Ohio State linebacker, because John Harbaugh has coveted that position highly over the course of his career. Whether it was C.J. Mosley as a first-rounder over a decade ago, whether it was trading for Roquan Smith, he's always wanted a leader at the middle linebacker position, and that is Sonny Styles to a T. This might be the freakiest linebacker I've ever scouted. The guy moves like a cornerback, but he's 6'4", 245. That's exactly what you want, especially when you're pairing it with Tremaine Edmonds, another guy who has like a 7-foot wingspan. You're going to shut down a lot of windows on the second level of that defense. And then I think the reason they were comfortable trading Dexter Lawrence at 10 is because they want a weapon for Jackson Dart. Joe Shane, his future is basically tied to Jackson Dart. Now, I'm not sure he's making this pick necessarily, but getting a guy who's more of a true number 1 or more rounded skill set than what they have there, which is a lot of speed guys, and Malik Neighbors coming off an injury. That's why I like Jordan Tyson, the Arizona State wide receiver. He's 6'2". He's almost 200 pounds. He can run the full route tree. And yeah, he's been banged up a lot. And you have a lot of guys in that receiving core that have been banged up a lot. But when he's on the field, this guy had the best tape in the entire draft class at the receiver position.
Yeah, he comes from the School of Hard Knocks with Hines Ward up there, Arizona State. So you know he's built forward tough. We'll see what happens there. 5 and 10 for the G-men. It feels like the Browns are always in this conversation this year. But again, at 6 and 24, what can they do in Cleveland finally?
I think they're in a great spot because their 2 needs, offensive tackle, wide receiver, are the 2 deepest spots in this first round. I think you're going to have probably 7 or 8 offensive tackles come off the board and probably 5 or 6 wide receivers come off the board. So they'll just be able to pick one off wherever it is. I think 6 is Caden Proctor, or not necessarily 6, but the first pick, because they could be very well a trade back spot there at number 6 for someone who wants to come up and jump either the Commanders or the Saints or the Chiefs. But Caden Proctor is the guy, in my opinion. He is a powerful, high-ceiling left tackle, and another team that can afford to take a big swing. Again, they don't necessarily need the guy right now. They need the guy year 2, year 3. And if you tell me Caden Proctor keeps his weight under control, I tell you he's the best offensive tackle in this draft class. He is a freak of nature, what he can do athletically, and he's only getting better every single year. And then at pick 24, I have him going Casey Concepcion. Like I said, OT wide receiver, it's setting up great for them. Concepcion, the only real issue with him is his hands, but as a route runner, as a guy who can create after the catch, this guy is special. And if he fell to that point in the draft, this would be a run in the card situation for the Cleveland Browns, because that is a skill set that this offense is desperately missing.
His hands. This is like Little Giants. You got to have hands. Let's hope that translates over to the NFL when it comes to Concepcion at 24. So they are obviously looking to rebuild in Cleveland. You may think the Chiefs are maybe more of reloading. You still have Patrick Mahomes. You still have Andy Reid. They have options at 9 and 29. Where do you see them going in that direction?
I think 9 is Ruben Bain Jr., the Miami defensive end, for 2 reasons. One, he's a perfect fit for Spag's scheme. I mean, he's not for everybody at that size, with the sub 31-inch arms. But for Steve Spagnuolo, they've never cared about arm length. They've cared about guys that are powerful pocket pushers. And there ain't a better guy in that mold than Ruben Bain, maybe ever, in the draft. This guy is special in that regard. So he's perfect for their scheme. And then 2 is that they don't draft top 10 often. They're not planning on doing it anytime soon with Patrick Mahomes. And so when that's the case, you got to attack the premium positions, edge, OT, the ones that don't fall in the draft. So that's why Ruben Bain makes a lot of sense. And then Avion Terrell at 29 feels like the perfect fit for what you lost, with your 2 cornerbacks leaving this offseason, specifically Trent McDuffie. I think this guy's skill set reminds me a lot of his. He's versatile. He can play outside, inside, forces fumbles, 8 the last 2 seasons. This would be a home run draft for the Chiefs.
All right, let's stay in the AFC and go to the Dolphins. We have a new regime. Obviously, Jeff Hafley, his first time as a head coach. He has 11 and 30. What happens there for him down in the 305?
I think the Dolphins just need building blocks. They need guys, they need to not miss on this draft, right? You have so little talent on this roster after this rebuild that you just need to get guys that can play a role. And to me, at number 11, that's Mansour Delane, the LSU cornerback. If you can have his tape as good as his was in the SEC, you can do it in the NFL. I don't care if he doesn't have the length, if he doesn't have necessarily the frame. The guy is a dog. He is going to be a darn good NFL corner. And this is a cornerback room that is about as bad as it gets. Unfortunately, their wide receiver room is about as bad as it gets in the NFL, too, which is why at number 30, I have them going Denzel Boston, the Washington receiver, another guy who's NFL ready and provides something they don't have. This is also not only one of the worst, it's one of the smallest receiving corps in the NFL. And at 6'4", 212 pounds, Denzel Boston is a outside, power forward type of wide receiver that can really run that X route tree that they just don't have right now.
All right, Mike, I just need to see you on camera for a second because I need you to be very gentle here. I'm a Cowboys fan. And, Jerry Jones, we just don't know what he's going to do. He may trade up to 4. I've been hearing stuff about Jeremiah Love and stuff. Or he may trade back and go in the second round. But right now they have 12 and 20. Give me something good. What is Jerry going to do?
I love the fit at number 12 of Jermod McCoy, the Tennessee cornerback.
Okay.
To me, he is the best cornerback in this draft class. He's the best cornerback since that year where we saw Stingley and Sauce come out. This guy is special, what he can do on tape. He just didn't play this past fall. He tore his ACL last January. But the good news is, with the timing of that, there really should be no residual effects coming into this season. And as pro day, there weren't when he ran a 4.38 and he had a 38-inch vertical and a 10.7 broad jump. So, he's back. And if he's back and healthy, this is the best corner in the class. So getting him at 12 would be a steal. And then number 20, I think Jerry's back to his old ways. They've loved to be flashy, but they also always invest in their offensive line. Yeah. And this is Maxie Honachor, the Arizona State offensive tackle, the guy with the best physical tools in this entire tackle class, the best all-around athlete. He only started playing football when he got to college. He played basketball all throughout high school. He looks like a basketball player playing tackle. That's a good thing, though. That's what you want offensive tackles to look like. You want athletes there. He just needs to be refined. So with Terrence Steele, you don't need him right now. But in year 2, year 3, you could have the best offensive line in the NFL with a pick like this. So they always invest before they necessarily need it. I think it would be a very Jones-esque draft to get these two guys.
Yeah, we love those red shirt players. Jamal really fits that bill. And O-line, that's what we do. That's all right. You might be onto something, Mike. I think that might happen like that. I want to get over to our rivals in Philly because it now seems like A.J. Brown he's still an Eagle as of right now, but there's been conversations about a possible deal with the Patriots at some point this offseason, maybe around June 1st, around that time period. But if that's the case, how does that change the draft for the Eagles and the Patriots, their approach later this month?
I think a lot of it has to do with who's on the board. I mean, similar to, I think, what happened when the Titans dealt him in the first place, is they wanted Treylon Burks, the guy who could, like, one-to-one replace him. I think for, the Eagles is that, do they want Denzel Boston if he's on the board there at 31, another guy who's a big outside wide receiver. But for the Patriots, it also might depend on, is an offensive tackle there that we like? Because that's also a desperate need for him. Yes, they need a wide receiver 1. They got a bunch of kind of wide receiver 2s and 3s on this team right now. But they also need a right tackle of the future. We saw how bad this offensive line was down the stretch last season. They need real help there. So if you're trading away first-rounders when a guy is there that can help you as a starting offensive lineman, I would just be a little wary to do so. So it wouldn't surprise me if it waits until the last minute on that one and we hear it announced if a trade is done right as the pick's on the clock.
All right, we got to wait and see when it comes to those two there. Mike Renner, as always, appreciate you tapping on everything. The draft, and when it comes to those teams that have those first picks there, those dual picks in the first round so far, in the past it's worked out. Top 10 picks there. You see Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. That was a postseason team not too long ago. Same thing when you talk about the Houston Astros there, or Houston Texans, I should say. C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson, Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson didn't work out, but others still trying to trend the Browns. Always in the conversations I mentioned, but still can't find them.
Welcome back to With the First Pick. It is draft week. General Manager Pete Prisco with us. Lee-J Dooswell with us. More than 10 years in the NFL. My guy, Rand Carthon, former Titans GM. I'm Ryan Wilson. And let's start at the top, guys. We've got a lot to get to with the draft. Hours away, it feels like. GM Pete, I'll come to you first. Dexter Lawrence traded from the Giants to the Bengals. The Giants get number 10, that pick from Cincinnati. On the surface, it feels like a win for Cincy, but where are you on how this all played out?
Does it really feel like a win for Cincy? I mean, look, I get it. I know why they're doing it. The regime is in trouble. First and foremost, they got to win. Joe Burrow is not happy. If they don't make moves to try and win games, he's probably going to want to go somewhere else. So you understand the move. And would they have got an impact player at 10 like Dexter Lawrence? Probably not. But talk to me in about 3 years and see how this works out for you.
Not even probably not. No is the answer, right?
Well, I mean, Dexter Lawrence a year ago wasn't great.
Hey, defend the defensive line, Lee J.
Yeah, well, to me, this makes so much sense because of what Pete just talked about. You're trying to maximize Joe Shiesty in this offense that's been explosive, one of the more explosive offenses over the last 3 or 4 years, and they've been abysmal on defense. And I know people will say, to his standard, Dexter Lawrence didn't play up to what we're accustomed to seeing him play. But I talked to interior offensive linemen in football, and he's still one of the most feared guys in football. A lot of what he does, Pete, doesn't show up in the scorecard, right, or the scorebook, because you have to put at least 2 guys on him every single play. And sometimes 3 guys. You turn on some of the tape, he gets most of the attention on that defensive line. I think Brian Burns will tell you firsthand that his ascension this last year has a lot to do with what Dexter Lawrence does in the middle of the defense. So if you're the Cincinnati Bengals and you've been abysmal, stopping the run, letting the ball get over your head, Dexter Lawrence helps you from day one. And to Ryan's point, at pick number 10, you're not going to find a player that is going to have the impact that Dexter Lawrence is going to have over the next 2 to 3 years.
Considering he was found at pick number 17, you can say that. Where was Jeffrey Simmons picked? At pick number 20, I think?
He had ACL.
But the bottom line is...
Is there anybody that has the makeup of Dexter Lawrence in this draft? Yes or no?
No.
No, so you're not going to find a player like Dexter Lawrence.
But here's the other thing. Carl Banks, who, look, he calls the games.
Love Carl.
He calls the games for the Giants. Carl Banks is one of the great players ever in the history of this league. He called him out last year for not being a factor on that team. And Carl Banks, to do that when you're an employee of the Giants, that tells you what they thought about Dexter Lawrence.
But it also shows you how people feel about how good Dexter Lawrence is, because they felt like he wasn't playing to his standard.
He wasn't.
I'll tell you this. Just knowing Dex personally and knowing that this has nothing to do with that. That has nothing to do with it.
Okay.
I know he's highly motivated to prove a lot of people wrong. And then also, he's going to a team where one of his close friends, B.J. Hill, is. And I talked to B.J. Hill. He was excited about this move. You know this, Pete. They couldn't stop anybody against the run.
The Giants didn't stop the run last year either.
All right,
telling you,
here's
this
the
is a
thing.
massive
You know
deal.
who else is highly motivated? Our Jonathan Jones, our CBS Sports NFL insider. And I think JJ has some news on what's going on with Sexy Dexy and what this all means for the Giants and, of course, the Cincinnati Bengals there as you look at the current updated top 10 where the Giants are now picking 5 and 10. All right, here we go, JJ. What do you got? Love the see-through specs looking like Jackson Dart there. So is this a Cincy thing or is this a New York Giants thing?
Well, first of all, Ryan, it's great to see you. Ran, it's great to hear from you so far in this show. Lee-J and Pete doing what you guys always do. Here's what I can tell you about the trade that took place with the Cincinnati Bengals, right? Yeah, the 10th pick in this draft, it's rich, right? But if we all agree that this is a lesser draft, then the 10th pick is not as valuable as typical drafts. And you also consider that the Cincinnati Bengals have not drafted all that well, right? We can go back to the Shamar Stewart case and all that stuff. They have not drafted well. So if you say, wow, 10th is rich, well, do you trust this team to make the right pick at 10, especially if you think this is like an 8 or so player first round, okay? They could have been frozen out of that. Dexter Lawrence, I think to Lee-J's point, if he returns to 2024 Dex and not 2025 Dexter Lawrence, if you get that version of Dexter Lawrence, you're going to get somebody who's going to help out Shamar Stewart and Miles Murphy on the edges, who is going to help out the guys behind him. And yes, they still need some stuff there on the Cincinnati defense. Lou Anarumo, who got fired by Cincinnati, I would have to think probably wasn't all that upset about leaving Cincinnati to go to the Indianapolis Colts. Meanwhile, the New York Giants, they understood that Dexter Lawrence wanted out. This was not necessarily about money because it's just a one-year, $28 million extension, right? The Giants could have done that. But instead, what they get here is another top 10 pick to help remake this team in the vision of John Harbaugh. And we know that he is calling the shots here. And so in the top 10, would I at all be surprised to see them go offense and defense or defense at 5 and 10? None whatsoever.
Yeah, I'll just throw in my little 2 cents. I know y'all got good credit. Y'all don't need any
Here,
co-signers.
reintroduce yourself again.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rand Carthon. I'm a part of this podcast. Thank you guys for joining us today. But no, here's the one thing I want to say, and this is more of a Cincinnati Bengals thing and not an indictment on Sexy Dexy or whatever, but are you a Dexter Lawrence away from making this a top-tier defense? Right, you add Dex, and you can put as many hands as you want on Dex in the middle, but how are you going to get to the quarterback? You still have tons of questions about who your edge guys, and we can say Shamar Stewart, we can say Miles Murphy, but we have not seen them do it. And so, again, my thing is, was this more of a let's show everyone we're trying to do something to fix this versus knowing that, okay, we're making this one fix and it's going to take our team to the next level?
I'll say this. They also brought in Boye Mafe from Seattle and then Brian Cook in the secondary. So they've tried to revamp. And to JJ's point, I'm so glad he brought that up. That's why I think that number 10 overall pick wasn't as vast as people think it is because they've struggled developing guys. We talked about Miles Murphy. He sort of started to turn the corner towards the end of last year, but Shamar Stewart hasn't really showed up. Chris Jenkins, another D tackle, hasn't showed up. So to me, why not get a proven guy? You add a Jonathan Allen, who had some struggles last year, but is a veteran player as well. You have B.J. Hill, you have T.J. Slayton. Pete, this is the first time they've actually had a good rotation of veteran guys at D tackle. When's the last time we could say that about the Bengals? And then you get Boye Mafe, Miles Murphy. Now you're not expecting Shamar Stewart to be the guy right now. He's going to be defensive end 3 or 4, and they fixed their safety with a guy that has championship pedigree in Brian Cook. So they've made some moves.
Real quick, Pete, before you go, I think, and to your point, I'm not refuting anything you're saying.
Yeah.
But I think what you just said shows that there's a larger issue in Cincinnati.
Oh, development issue for sure.
If there's a development issue, then, I mean, every year, I mean, are you going to adopt a let's need F those picks and you're just going to trade them for first round for known guys? You know, but that to me, that just adds even more questions than answers.
Here's what you have to ask yourself when it comes to this trade. If the Bengals coaching staff and front office weren't on notice, and Joe Burrow was happy in Cincinnati, do they make that move?
But sometimes
that's a lot of ifs, though.
But that's why you're making a move based on something that you're kind of panicking a little bit.
But sometimes isn't that what you need, a kick in the pants to get your mind right and when you understand your job isn't going to be there no matter what, that, okay, let's make this. We see this all the time when the season is done for these teams in week 15 and they just start playing guys they should have been playing before.
Well, here's the other part of the equation that we're not entering in here. If you draft in that spot, that money for that player is a lot less than what you're going to be paying this guy in terms of.
And so is the production, though.
There's like a $10 million difference, so you got to kind of add that to his salary too.
Well, let me ask you this about the Bengals in particular.
Cap, though. They're fine.
I get it, but you still you got to look to the future. We're just discounting draft picks now. Okay,
this is an all-in move, though, Pete. This is literally an all-in move to try to get back to the Super Bowl for them.
Dexter Lawrence is 28. He'll be 29 during the season, so he's not 100 years old.
30-year-old is defensive lineman. Going off the cliff.
But let me ask you this, and I mentioned it at the top. What is a better choice at 10 than Dexter Lawrence if you're the Bengals to make this team better?
What year? We're not talking about just right now. We're talking
for
about
2 years from now. I would even say this
about the organization.
From 2 to 3 years from now.
Young players. That's how you build your team. Cheap, young players.
Let me ask you this, Rand. If you draft cheap young players and your defense has been as bad as it's been for the Bengals for the last 4, 5, 6 years, is changing it up and getting a proven player like Dexter Lawrence a terrible idea?
It's not a terrible idea, but at the same time, you turn around and you pay him whatever the new average is going to be on that contract. Here's how you know. Just go back to just the history of time in building teams. They've spent heavy on the offensive side of the football. And there will be room on the defensive side to pay one guy here, one guy there, but you can't pay everybody. So that's where you're going to have young talent. And the way to get young talent is through draft choices. But like everyone keeps saying, there's a developmental issue here. And so, again, it leads to larger things. So I'm all on board with if you don't win it this year, then something will probably be done to move on, because you got to get people in there that can develop young talent and allow you to balance out your books and building the team.
All right, let's go back to the other smart guy with glasses, Jonathan Jones.
Look, I think this does go back to the fact that this is an organization that has been below average at drafting, right? If they didn't make this move at 10 on Thursday night, all I was going to hear Pete Prisco was give them a D for how terrible they just drafted at number 10 overall, right? When you consider what they have done the last couple of years, they let Jesse Bates walk. They try to bring in Dax Hill. That didn't work, right? Miles Murphy, Lige just talked about it, starting to turn the corner, but we really got to see a little bit more out of him. Remember, they took Jermaine Burton in the 3rd round. He's not even on the team anymore, right? Shamar Stewart in that ridiculous contract dispute that took place, and he hasn't shown up at all. Chris Jenkins, the list goes on, and Pete is correct that this is not, can you get Dexter Lawrence or a Dexter Lawrence-like player at 10th overall? It's not just that, because at 10th overall, you're paying that player a whole lot less than you are Dexter Lawrence. But while it is a 1-year, $28 million extension, it is effectively a 3-year, $70 million contract. We still haven't seen how this deal is ultimately structured, but essentially you can get 2 years out of Dexter Lawrence. Let's call it the end of his prime, right? If he goes back to 2023, 2024, Dexter Lawrence, you get that for 2 years. You can cut bait in that final year. And was it ultimately what you would have done at 10 overall? I think there's a pretty decent argument with that. This organization, a good Dexter Lawrence for 2.5 years is better than who they would have taken at number 10.
All right, good start. Good talk. Let's take a quick break here. We come back. We're going to look at JJ's one and only mock draft, the Insider Edition. We'll look at that top 10 right after this break.